pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the hearing on the preliminary budget, which is posted to the town website. And also next week on the 1st, and I hope folks who are watching on TV or listening will come out and join us. The meeting is going to start a half an hour earlier for those who want to come, with a Veterans Day ceremony led by the Honorable John Murphy, and recognizing a Tappan resident who has served his country, and he won. Obviously, it's not required, and our meeting will start officially at 7:30.
Will you have, you'll have Chris there at 7 o'clock? So
7 o'clock is for John Murphy. And
I'm saying, would you have the TV at 7 o'clock though?
I'm working on that. I have to check with our volunteer, or maybe we can confirm availability from IT. But my goal would be to have TV there. Absolutely.
Okay, good, because it fits in with Veterans Day coming up.
I agree with that.
Good.
Yep. We'll make sure we've got that covered. I don't imagine it'll be a problem. I just don't like to promise until I've got the thing lined up. On that note, we do have a number of items on the workshop agenda to talk about and review. I don't think it's going to take very long, really. But I just wanted to start out, if I could just get help from John Giardello back there. Thank you, John. Because every week, and I know there's Amy and Heather and Barbara are here, and the town board and the building department and the town attorney's office have all been working on the Aloof situation, and I thought it would be helpful just to spend a minute with an update. I could do the quick and dirty, and you can fill in.
I'd rather hear from John.
Like I said, the basic frame is that they've been in court, they've been at the ZBA, they're due back at the ZBA. The DEC has set a deadline for them to present an engineer's recommendations for fixing the odor leaks. That deadline is January 21st. And so that's sort of a current status.
Correct.
There's also been some air sampling by the DEC, and some preliminary results of raw data have come back, but the DEC hasn't yet provided any kind of analysis related to that, at least in my office anyway.
No.
So over to you, just in terms of.
So we had Aloof in court last week. Because they're in front of the ZBA, there was a stay. There's a control date to go back to court on November 17th. November 16th is the ZBA hearing. We're hoping to have something done by the 16th. Dennis Michaels, Deputy Town Attorney, asked their attorney to have the report in, I believe it was November 2nd or 3rd, to the ZBA, so that we'd have time to review it. And that's basically where we are. DEC has finished their monitoring. As Andy said, there's some data that's available. I haven't seen any analysis from DEC yet, and that's where we stand.
Now, John, I talked to you on Thursday at the hearing. You said you were going to be going up to the Department of Public Health. Did you get up there yet?
Oh, okay, yeah, we did. Went out Friday and went through some of their files that they had available. Basically, just trying to see where they were in terms of when they went for their air monitoring system or their odor control system. And they did have one, I think there was a permit to construct issued by the health department back in February of 2013. It was 2013. But then I guess shortly after that's when the health department eliminated that division. So the DEC apparently took it over. They said they knew about it. I saw a permit from the DEC, but I'm not sure, what, in terms of what they actually issued. I haven't reviewed it, but I know they issued a permit shortly after that.
So the DEC issued a permit?
It was a permit, yeah.
Do we know what it was a permit for or not?
I don't. I'd have to, review it.
So
I haven't
now we got to go up to the DEC because the Department of now we have to go up to the DEC Because,
Well, again, the way I understand it is the health department eliminated that division because they didn't want to be repetitive with the New York State DEC, and that's where we are.
The DEC permit is a known document that a lot of us have looked at. It's their permit for emissions, and pursuant to that is all of their monitoring and issuing violations and holding aloof.
we're not,
So that's
we're not talking about that, we're talking about
different permit.
whether there was a permit applied for, or issued, or not issued regarding extruders that are at the facility. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about them permitting them to operate. We're talking about, there's concern that there's a number of extruders, and we want to make sure that the DEC or the Department of Public Health signed off on all these extruders that are at the location. I thought that was,
And if there's any construction, wouldn't they have to get an Orangetown permit?
Correct.
no. Well, construction for
Okay,
the
we're
outside, but I don't
talking about
Well,
two
any
separate,
extruders would have to
we're
get,
talking about two separate things.
right.
When the extruders come in, we deny it to go for performance standards. That's on the local level. The DEC permits the odor control. Part of that is taking the odors away from the extruders. So they have certain types of requirements in terms of, see, originally they vented outside the building to the sides of the building. Then in 2012, Greg Price said, no, you have to make these stacks, which they came in for, which go top of the roof, and they're 30 feet high.
Okay.
And so that
So the
was all part of
stacks
that.
had a building permit. The
Right.
stacks had a
They
building permit.
applied for a building permit. We denied it to go to ACA board because of the aesthetics. That's really what we look at in that sense. We don't approve the process or the odor control system. That's not what we do. That's why the health department had a permit issued for it.
But you guys issue the permits for the extruders,
That's correct.
and every extruder they have, there's a permit for?
I believe so.
And they're all closed out. There's no open permit
There is
for
open
extruders.
permits. I
There
can't
is?
say there is for the extruders. There are open permits. I've notified them to come in and close them out.
For the aesthetics, or for the?
No, for different things. For the stack, that's correct.
That is what is on that application.
Correct.
So.
They went to hack a board, they did what they had to do, they just never closed out the permit.
I have a clarifying question as well.
Sure.
We know that the DEC has required an engineering plan to stop the leaks, and it's due on January 21st.
Correct.
And then they're going to review it. And I've asked them to give us a seat at the table, and we've already been included in various ways. So I'm hopeful and confident that when they receive that plan on the 21st, that you and I
Right.
and others will get to weigh in on it to make sure that ultimately the plan for upgrading odor control that they approve is really responsive and comprehensive,
Right.
and they're investing as much. So that's one report, but you're mentioning a report due on November 2nd for the ZBA, and I would just like to know sort of what's that one? Is that the cumulative performance standard?
That's
kind of
correct.
description of all their machinery that's inside
Correct.
there, and
Right. And
what
then-
they added, what they
Well,
changed?
it's a cumulative impact of all their machinery or operations, let's call it. And then part of that is under our section of the performance standards, there's they have to meet a certain requirement in terms of odor. They have to take 3 measurements, certain areas on the perimeter of the property. So, and that's what I've told them to come in and comply with. So they have to provide that in a report, that they are in compliance with that requirement.
But, I mean, seeing how they have till January 21st to come up with a plan for the DEC, how is the ZBA gonna have a performance standard hearing without them, A, submitting a plan to DEC, and B, actually complying with that? So I don't see how the ZBA can issue any kind of.
Well, the ZBA is separate from what the DEC is going to require.
But you don't think the ZBA would want to know that they have a plan that's viable before they do performance standards? I
They
would
could,
hope they
sure,
would.
I would hope so too.
I mean, it just seems to me like they're going back, and I was at the hearing, and they gotta submit it by the 2nd, which is next Wednesday. But it doesn't make any sense, because until they have a plan,
Right.
why would the ZBA give them anything? Until they comply with that plan,
Correct. I haven't seen
you know? I
the
just think
DEC's
it's,
requirements.
I don't know.
They may be different, I mean, I don't know.
But-
We have our requirements.
I just don't see how anything's gonna be really accomplished at this November 16th hearing and the November 17th, hearing over here, when you're gonna submit the small part, but the big part is not even gonna be, the deadline's not until January 21st. So
I know.
to me,
I didn't
it's like,
I didn't set
you're gonna
that
bring them
deadline.
in, but it's really not gonna do anything.
Right.
Just that, I would also myself hope that the ZBA defers judgment until they've gotten all the information through the DEC studies as well. And I think you're right on about that, Tom. But hopefully that interim report and the conversation will sort of add to the knowledge base. It may even be helpful back to the DEC as they consider their,
I mean, they were notified, they know that we're doing the performance standards. They're part of the notification process.
one of
John-
the,
How can they operate with open building permits? I
It
mean, like
happens.
if you had a different kind of commercial business and you didn't you had open building permits, you're really not allowed to open until you have a CO or use a,
It's different, we've had that in other places too. I mean, we've had a remediation system at Xerox, for example, and they had, under a DEC requirement, to put in monitoring wells. And the reason they came to us was they wanted to build a shed over one of these pump, wells. We didn't approve the system, that was all DEC, did everything. But we required them to get a permit for the shed. They never closed it out. Now, they sold the property just recently, and the buyer found violations on the property. It happens. I'm not saying everyone's perfect.
are these building permits that we should be worried about? I mean, are these building permits or construction that, who knows if the stack was built right, or are these just
Some of them
final?
are like guy wires, the other one is the system.
So it's not really about the system working or not working, that's DEC, it's about the construction of
The
the system.
aesthetics, right?
okay.
It still concerns me that there's open permits on. and they're
Yeah, I
operating
guess
years.
I guess it does happen that sometimes companies just fail to finish off their paperwork or get a final inspection of some kind, and that can come back to haunt them in various ways. There's a lot on this. I just want to say that, right now, with the DEC, and I know we sent this to you either yesterday or today, that the Aloof was given a deadline of October 21st to present kind of a scoping or description of the engineering study that will then make recommendations. That's due January 21. I would really appreciate your comments back on that. The first comment I had was one that you and I discussed, which is that obviously it needs to look at the odor control system for the extruders, but what about the fans in the top of the building? I mean, it's taking stinky air, I guess, and just shooting it out the roof
Right,
because
the
it's
heat
ambient.
fans, right?
And if that's true, then that should be covered as well
Mhm.
in an engineering review to figure out how to stop the odors. And so I made a note of that, but any other,
Sure.
we want to make sure that the study is scoped broadly and comprehensively, and then of course the recommendations that come out of it are reviewed, and they're just aggressive. They should be able to stop these odors in their tracks, essentially. So thank you for your work on that. I know the town attorney's office and the DC and the residents who have been consistently logging the odor incidents and putting out information and sending us useful information. We got email today with more names of vendors for air sampling and some preliminary analysis of the DEC's preliminary data. So that was helpful too. Just moving on with our meeting, and thanks again, John, for that. Appreciate it. There's a number of agenda items here. The first one is one that we discussed with a fair amount of detail last week, which has to do with the landlord rental registry. And as it's printed here, it's the same as last week. I know that you and John Edwards were going back and forth on some edits, coming out of the meeting last week.
Yep.
I'm not permission. I don't have those edits. I don't know how much of
John,
a discussion we can really have
I
tonight.
sent John all the edits, but they're in compliant, they conform to what we discussed last week, and John's not feeling well, so I'm hoping he'll have them ready so we can still vote on this next week.
So I look forward to that. I want to just share with you, one of the things that I think we need to know is the total number of properties potentially affected, and sort of get a sense of if we're collecting fees on them, how much on the revenue side, and like what the total workload is. And so
2,227 homes that do not have STAR, 654 condos, there are 532 two-family houses, which is 1,064 units.
Right.
There are 23 three-families, which is 69 units. There are 54 apartment buildings, which is 763 units. There are 49 multi-dwelling, which means more than one house on lot, which is 121 units. In total, there could be possibly 4,898 possible rentals in the town.
So that's on the residential side. Last week, and again, we were in good conversation and clarify things, and it seemed to me that you wanted to change the proposal to include rentals of retail spaces and other kinds of commercial enterprises.
Well, those would be
I
the
don't
mo-
have that number yet, but I think it would be helpful
mean,
to have that.
I really, there's a lot. I mean, that's the deal. There's a lot of units that it could affect. It doesn't change the fact that I still think we should have it. I know that's 500 rental units right there, and I'm sure the commercial side will add to that number. But it's about knowing who owns property so that, we know who our neighbors are and we can notify them if there's an issue with the town. So, I have a pretty good idea of on that sense. I can get the other numbers on the commercial, but I still think,
That's what I was going to say. It would be helpful.
It's-
It has nothing to do, everybody here has already said they support this initiative.
But
The question is sort of figuring out how to put it into operation.
I think we
And,
discussed that last week, and I think
We did, yeah.
everyone here is pretty much on board with it. I talked to Paul, he's,
Again, I would recommend changes, a few of them, like I think there should be, if we want to know who owns the property, it should be per property, not per unit. Some minor changes, but in theory, I'm definitely
Yeah.
in favor of the law, Tom. I told you that I think it's important to know who owns the property, but is it about collecting fees, or is it about who owns the property? If it's about who owns the property, I don't see why it couldn't be one fee per property.
well, I was discussing this with John. Here's the deal. So we have, on the residential side, maybe 5,000 units. So it should be about units, because 5,000 units to do register for, it's gonna be expensive. And if you don't do it per unit, and we have to take taxpayer dollars to fund that area, you're basically asking people who are not landlords to fund a registry that is for the people making money off of renting property in this town. I'd rather have the people making money off of rentals pay for the cost of the registry, and we might come back and decide to change that number. But, I don't think $20 per unit every 2 years is a financial burden, and I think it does what we want to do, which is know who the owners of these properties are.
Okay, and the, most of the people who are renting in apartments, let's be real. I mean, we both know that the landlord isn't gonna pay this. What's he gonna do? He's gonna tack it on to his tenant, and if there's more paperwork and more work involved for him, or more paperwork and more work involved for the town, eventually, Everybody's paying for it. And usually the people renting apartments aren't the rich people, it's the young kids starting out or the older people waiting to retire. So if it's about knowing who owns the property, it should be per property. So instead of maybe being 5,000 pieces of paper the town has to shuffle, maybe it's only 1,000 pieces of paper, and we don't have to hire someone new. And you still have the end result. The end result is finding out who owns the property.
But there's gonna be a cost, and that should be the burden of the people who own these properties. And if it's less than we thought, then we can reduce the number.
That's part of why I'm saying, let's make sure we have as accurate as possible number, so that we know what the revenues are and to what extent it will offset the cost. And so
I think the
I'm gonna
revenues are
look to
not gonna,
improve those
they're not
numbers.
gonna cover the cost. I mean, like, to maintain this, it's just not gonna.
I think it's possible that it might, actually, Tom, if you did $20 a unit and, you know.
But it's
if
every
you got
2 years.
Every
It's
2 years, so
years.
that's, if you got 4,000 of them, that's $80,000 over 2 years. You know, that significantly defrays the cost of.
But we pass
staffing.
laws where we don't try to defray the cost. I mean, look, to be honest, the park residency requirement law is never gonna
Right, that one.
break
the-
even, it's just not gonna happen,
revenues
but we
are low
wanted to
compared
You know,
protect the parks, and
as
I
a
was good
landlord
with
in
that.
town, I have no problem paying the fee, so.
Yeah. No, and
you
I
know,
think that.
And it won't go onto my residence, I'll eat it, you know, because I think it's that important.
It is important. So I'm gonna try to make sure we have accurate numbers for how many rentals there are, including the commercial, so that we can have a better sense of where that might leave us in terms of costs and revenues. And anything else that we can work on between now and Tuesday. You know,
Well,
I think we've had some good
I'm just
discussion
hoping
on
we
this,
get to see the changes. I was expecting them tonight so we could discuss the final version. But I think it's very close.
Me too. So that's, there's a number of resolutions on here related to passing this new local law. And, I don't know, we can look up through, number 6, basically. And then, at number 7, this is the annual, the celebration of Veterans Day and the fee waiver for golf, which we did last year, I think, at Paul's suggestion, and we checked with Dave Wasenda at Applied Golf, and he's happy to continue that, which is great. Number 8 is this is a performance bond that is kind of a routine matter for the highway department when things get built. Number 9 is this is the contract with the town's independent auditing company, O'Connor Davies. And I know that Jeff and his staff have worked with them the last couple of years. They've worked for the town for a while. They wanted, I think, a 3-year contract, but we put in here on the workshop agenda a 1-year contract, just thinking that the board may want to periodically kind of go out to bid, essentially, on this. It's a fairly sizable and important contract. I'm not saying we need to decide that now, but we put it in for 1 year to give the board options next year if it decides that it wants to just sort of refresh the list a little bit as far as who does the independent audit. And that's not said with any prejudice towards O'Connor Davies. And I will note also that between their efforts and really Jeff's efforts and his staff, they keep getting the annual award and the certificate for outstanding, CAFR statement, and I think that they're doing a good job. So that's number 9, and if there's any kind of comments or questions about that, anybody want to hear from Jeff about it?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Just for the board's edification, that number has been flat since 2010, so there's no increase in that.
Number 10 is the award of a bid for cast iron curb inlets. Jim Dean was here before, he's right behind Jeff. If you have any questions about about the road repair or drainage work, he's here, can address that. There's also awarding a bid for roof replacement, highway administration garage, and there's a resolution for that. Jim, maybe you should, given the importance of that project, just, take a minute to refresh the board's memory as to what improvements are being made there.
Yes, actually, 2011, we did the large part of the highway garage where the equipment storage facility is. That was about 300 feet long. And that was, I think it was $280,000 for that project. Now, we're looking at the section that houses the mechanical repair, our storage, our employee lunchroom, bathrooms, and also the slanted roof on the administration. That was built in the early 1991 or some 90, so that's about 25 years old now. That's a regular shingle roof. The other ones are flat roofs that were originally built with the original building in 1964, were repaired once or done over once, but there was a membrane product put on there that really has been giving us troubles. I have pictures and documentation of the leaks that we have, the tiles that are broken, the rooms that are being impacted by the water actually coming through. That's on that building, and that was 170, I think you have the cut sheets, it was 177,000, I think. The other is the outbuilding, which is the separate building south of our garage opposite the salt shed. That was built in the late 80s, 87, and nothing has ever been done to those roofs, and they're at the point where they need to be redone. So this is actually money from our CHIPS program, so I have it, it's there, we don't have to borrow it. We've been, by judiciously working on our pavement program, and by passing the 3 years of the pavement preservation program, it's given us the money to be able to get this thing done. And this is the time to do it. We've actually been maintaining it every year. Last year, I think we spent $5,000 checking, running after bad spots. So it's time. We shouldn't let this go. The original building in '64, it's really critical because the structures that are actually the ceiling from downstairs and the top of the building on the outside are about 4 inches thick of a manufactured product. If they start to get saturated and you lose them, we've got a really big problem. So we're getting to the point where it's getting very risky. So this is definitely the time to do it. We got 2 bids. Hayden is a local contractor who did the other roof for us. Very high quality work. They've done a good job. And this is not going to be a membrane roof. It's going to be a regular built-up roof with the paper and tar and gravel cover, the way the original building was built.
Jim, I know you've done a lot with energy efficiency at the highway department. Is this roof project, does it sort of set the table for rooftop solar in some way, or isn't that kind of on the list?
We've looked at the solar number.
Sometimes you got to do the roof before you do any solar, so.
Well, I mean, the roof needs to get done.
I know that, yeah.
So it would be very impractical to try to do solar and then go around it.
That's
and
what
do
I'm
the
saying.
roof.
I'm wondering
so-
if.
But
we
it needs to
talked
get
about
done, not to be ready for solar. It needs to get done so we don't lose the roof.
that. I understand that.
But
I didn't- yeah.
going that way, the next step would be to put solar if we can get it to be economical.
Right.
We've looked into it a couple of times, and it just didn't pay for itself. As things change, yeah. And
I know, partly it's because Jeff does a great job of brokering and getting the energy deals. But maybe it expands the amount of roof that might be appropriate, and maybe we should revisit it if depending on what
The portions that I was talking about on the original building, built in '64, are all flat roofs. Total is close to 400 lineal feet that has a southern exposure.
Right,
It seems like it would be a perfect place for solar.
right.
But every time we've looked into it, the credits have not been in our favor, It just has not come up as a moneymaker
Yeah, they haven't been
or
able to beat
even
our
paying
price.
for itself.
Yeah, yeah.
You're looking at a 15 to 20-year return on investment, and that's not something that we thought was practical at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. All right,
Okay.
thank you. Is there anything else you want to advise the board about while you're up there?
No, the next one is the drainage project in,
That's
off
the Pearl
Lois
River.
Drive.
Yep.
If you have any questions related to that, we call it a water course. It's actually, it's not a stream because it only runs water when there's heavy rains, but that water starts all the way up by the Pearl River High School. And this area that we're looking at is down between Orangeburg Road and Gilbert Avenue. Actually, it's probably about 600 feet north of Gilbert Avenue. We have a pipe crossing there that the bottom, where the flow of the pipe comes out is probably 6 feet below the elevation of the road that it goes under. But over the years, with the when you get the heavy rains, it's washed out another 3 feet or more of the ditch. So now the backyard is 9 feet above the level of the ditch, and it's undermining the trees that are there and the yards.
Right.
It would be very difficult to try and stabilize that. So if we had to try and just cut the banks back, we'd probably be going back another 15 to 20 feet into the existing property owner's property. So when we kind of discussed that with them, the best project would be to put a pipe in there. It'll be easier for us to do. It also will give us an opportunity at the outflow of the pipe to develop a energy dissipation system, so we don't have the same kind of scouring as we go downstream or at the end of this pipe.
Right.
But it will be a benefit to the property owner too, because he'll be able to use it. His yard is bisected by where this pipeline goes through. So the area where we put the pipe in, which we're anticipating probably be 75 to 100 feet, will be connecting his backyards. With that in light, we negotiated with him that he'd be willing to pay for the pipe. But we need to do the engineering work. Our engineering department is gonna do the design, but we need them to be able to run some models to tell us exactly what size pipe we need.
Right.
And what we're gonna have to do to dissipate the energy downstream, because there's still another 600 or 700 feet of open ditch downstream from here. So if the plan is to be able to pipe this in, reduce the erosion downstream by capturing it at this one spot.
Any questions from the town board on that? Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
It sounds like
Thank you.
it's an important project.
Joe,
It's modest.
as I said in
cost.
the memo, the engineering and highway have been working on this
Right.
together.
Our next agenda item is number 13. 13 is accepting with regret the retirement of Jim Wilson from Parks and Rec Department, effective October 29th after 24 years of service. Please convey to Jim, Eric, our appreciation and thanks for that. Number 14 is accepting with regret retirement of Rosemary Majorano from the clerk's office. She's also a long-serving town employee who will be greatly missed. And number 15 is the appointment of Robert Gerard as maintenance supervisor in the Parks Department. And there's information here from the Personnel Department and Parks as to the specifics of that. It's a funded vacancy, and we wish him the best of luck in his new work. Any questions from the town board about those personnel matters? Nope, not seeing any.
Personnel, Donna and I worked on that classification for the engineer / zoning code enforcement officer. And, we looked into the salary requirements and what have you. And I guess, Donna, is there anything else you need from us before you send it up to county? Okay. All right, thank you.
Andy, on that note, too, the problems we're having that used to be covered by the Rockland, by Rockland County at the health department aren't just town-wide, you know. I mean, right now we have Aloof, but after Aloof, there'll probably be something else, but there's not, I don't know if there's a full-time position, but there would be county-wide a full-time position, which there used to be. And if something's built in Clarkstown, right on the border of Orangetown, it just blows across the border, and there's nothing we can do about it. So I think we really should petition the town or send a letter up to Ed Day and all of their legislators while they're doing their budget, asking for that position to be reestablished, because it really should be a county-wide position, not a town position. And then when they had a person there, he was doing apparently a good job. He was keeping
I
Aloof at
think he
bay.
was very well respected, Greg Price was, and I think that it's partly a credit to him that some of the odor control stuff that's at Aloof now was put in.
So-
And I know John has said many times that was a useful position for the town, and when they eliminated that, it increased the burden on the town.
Well, I think
do
we
wa-
should write to all of our legislators and to Ed Day, you know, they're in their middle of their budget thing, and I think it's a county problem that needs to be addressed county-wide, and I would love to sign on to that letter if you.
I'm happy to draft that. It's something that I know I have, probably others as well, have talked directly with Ed about, and he's steadfast in his position. Just, you know, so you know, he won't be surprised to get that letter, because, you know, we've already expressed that to him. But I agree with you, it was a useful service, and it was an unfortunate cut. And we have said that in the past, and I don't think it can hurt to remind him of that.
And I honestly, you know, he's been doing a good job with the county budget. Maybe he could see his way clear to add in that position back or to change something in the budget.
I would love for him to do that.
Well, I think we should cover all bases,
We
Tom.
should.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't go ahead with your thing, I'm just saying
No,
that
I'm
we
just
should.
saying, if you got his latest email blast about the budget, he says it's the tightest budget ever, and he cut spending by 3.5%, and I just don't see Ed putting it back in
How
there.
about the legislators?
Listen,
They go against his budget quite a bit and add things back in.
I mean,
They did last year.
we asked them about the community college chargebacks. They sent us a bill for $400,000. You know, I'm just saying,
All right, so maybe it's wishful thinking, but I think it's worth the
I
paper.
think we'll send it up, because we always do.
I
are
think
the
we
thorn
always
in the
gotta
side of-
try, you know, I agree
No,
with you.
but I think we're gonna send a letter up, it's a great idea, but we've gotta
Prepare,
prepare.
absolutely.
One of the things is the legislature voted not to override the cap, you know, so therefore they need to come in under the cap.
I think they're at
And,
1.75%
well,
right
they're
now.
right in that limit. The other thing is, the health department, I know, because I work with, you know, I support the health department, and it's been, each year, it's being cut. There's another program that's being eliminated this year, going into 2017. It's nothing to do with this, but it's another program in the health department. So they seem to be downsizing what they're doing in health, and also mental health, for the last several years there.
Maybe we could get Rockland County Solid Waste Authority to pay for it, because they have a lot of money. And we pay them a lot of money. Maybe they can give us this position in exchange for being the host for that stinky sewer department they put in our town.
Andy, you're on that board, right? Why don't you guess-
No, you know, it's funny.
Again, wishful thinking.
No, I agree with you in terms of the solid waste. The sewer department is a whole different issue. You know, it's a, Andy, did you get a schedule from Diane Phillips and when that's going to be fixed?
That's what we're gonna get on Thursday,
Because
hopefully.
Aloof
Uh,
seems
the-
to be, for me, just reading their emails, taking great pleasure in the fact that they're concerned about the sewer smell, and they're sending out their
They're
notes to
trying
everybody.
to pass the buck. They're trying to point the finger. They
Yeah,
got to
no,
take
there's no doubt
responsibility for
about
their
that. They're
thing.
trying to point the finger.
Yeah.
So I think it's important we get a schedule on that also.
I mean, the ironic thing is that Aloof hasn't been open for a while because of the Jewish holidays, so more likely than not, the smells that you've been smelling for the last week are the Rockland County Sewer Department, because they took off a week for Succus, and so they haven't been running those machines, so, you know, it's definitely the county sewer department that you're smelling the last week.
And I think that those of us who live around here really can tell the difference between Aloof and the sewer department, and
Sewer's
the
been
sewer
right.
has been absolutely horrible, and they got a lot of explaining to do, and I've been getting calls about that, and it's just been terrible, and it's you know, it needs to be stopped. I note also just, you know, there's host fees for other towns for some of these things, particularly the sewer, and Orangetown doesn't get them. And I've brought that up before the sewer board as well. There are impacts from hosting the wastewater treatment plant, which really do affect our quality of life, our real estate values, and you know, it's just the odors have been inexcusable, and I know that it's not the first time, and there's a certain amount of odor associated with wastewater treatment, no matter what. But Diane, the executive director, fully accepted, you know, that they've had some serious mechanical problems. They were having to truck waste out of there for various reasons. Their process fell apart. They have said that it's largely put back together again, but it took too long to get kind of rectified. And so on Thursday, I've requested them to give a full report to the commission and give some sense of how this kind of thing will be prevented in the future. I'm happy to report back on that. I just wanted to, I did get a text from our wonderful volunteer, Just TV, confirming that, yes, he will be here for 7 o'clock on Tuesday for the beginning of the Veterans Recognition Ceremony. So that answers that question with certainty. Are there any other matters for the town board for tonight?
Nope.
I just want to mention one thing, and that is, I'll just, rather than bring Eric up, the staff of facilities did identify a rusted out kind of I-beam in the bottom of Town Hall that will need to be supported at some cost, we don't know yet, with some temporary supports. And it's not you know, an emergency. The building is safe, but it does remind us of how important it is to move forward with an analysis of how we're going to deal with this side of Town Hall in the longer term. And to that end, I just want to remind the board that we're aiming to get our respondents to the request for a study back for second interviews in November. I've had requests from town board members to wait until after we pass the town's budget, but we're going to schedule those for later in November.
Which side of the building is that?
This side of the building over here.
Because several years ago, on the west side of the building, there was one of the beams kind of bent and almost snapped a gas pipe. You know,
So these are the kinds of things that fortunately Eric and his staff are, you know, they've done so much to keep this building going, the heating, the air conditioning, and some great work in a wing and a prayer and spending some money. But the particular beam in question is actually right under our steps on the south side.
Just so you know, we would have lost Bob Simon and receiver of taxes and some of our attorneys.
Just one,
Not that that's funny.
We
I'm
would have
sorry.
lost a lot more than that.
just, Ed, do you have any updates on the RPC property and the Gino situation?
They asked for an extension. We discussed it in terms of getting their purchase offer in, and that was extended from September 30th to October 30th. We didn't do paperwork on that because we'd already done it and it didn't seem necessary. We also have a data center group that's,
But I just kind of want to know what's going on with, the question is, what is going on with Gino? We've given him now 8 months to come up with any kind of offer, you know?
well, as you probably recall, the town board voted to give him, you know, X number of months, I forget what it was, 5 or something, to get the purchase offer in, and that period has expired. So, although the finance people they have said, you know, but you know, like we've said a million times, you know, until you actually see the purchase offer and the capacity to do the project, you know, it's just a verbal thing.
So
that you
right
can't bank
now,
on.
we're
So-
no closer.
So that I can't speak for them, but I call them at least once or twice a week, and if it doesn't come in, I agree with Tom. I think we've talked about before. We need to turn around and issue a request for proposals just for town land, because when it came to involving the state, which was the way we were approaching it a couple of years ago, it just kind of got bogged down in issues of how to work with their land. So we should do a request for proposals, and we should probably make an agreement with a group like CBRE or Cushman Wakefield, and I think that all the thought that's gone into movies and data centers and so on will give us maybe some more specific ideas about our target market of buyers. I think it's important to do that and do that this fall, because who knows how long this sort of economic cycle will last before we're back in some kind of a decline, and money kind of dries up
What
for
were you saying
redevelopment.
about the data center you started to?
Just on the data center, as people are aware, Orangetown is really sort of a hot location for data centers, and the Bloomberg and the Ram Land and others have really shown that. And so I've shown that property to various data center folks, just like any other developer. If they're within the scope of what the town has said they want to see, I'll make sure they know about it and give them all the information. And so, it's one of those, it's sort of a teaser, but if they get a purchase offer in, then that would be really exciting.
I've had 2 other sets of developers that are interested in the site, but have been waiting for the Kamali proposal to come fruition. And again, now we've had our second 1-month extension, all right, and still no closer. So
Yeah, my feeling is until you see that purchase offer, you don't. But my approach,
Just a
Dennis,
pipe
just so you
dream.
know, is that I basically never say, if there's a developer with a reasonable concept, if they want to build 1,000 houses, I don't take time to show them around. But if they're doing data centers, if they're interested in movie stuff, if they're interested in things that make sense, then I always take the time to meet with them, and the folks that you should tell them. It's always good to be planting the seeds, because you always want to have something in your back pocket, and so I encourage you.
both of those groups have had tours of
Okay.
the data center, to look at not the data,
Of our
tour of the
land.
facility, to look at the challenges in terms of the abandoned buildings, and in terms of being right next to a psychiatric center. There's still challenges there, but the other thing, instead of going piecemeal, in terms of a data center, the issue still is, you still have Rockland Children's Psychiatric Center still
Absolutely.
laying out there. We still have no commitment from the state on that. We still don't have a commitment on the staff court. You get the old power station still laying around out there. And you have around 65, 70 buildings that are abandoned with lead and asbestos, abandoned by the state. So to put one data center in there isn't going to do it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Although I will say this particular one wants 65 acres, which has got to be the biggest data center anybody's ever seen. So, but we'll see.
Well, that's a good piece.
That's a good piece. Yeah. So, but again, please don't have people in the wings. If they want to see maps, they want to see the environmental reports from past proposals, let's bring them in. And let's make a commitment that if we don't get a purchase offer within the next few weeks,
By
let's
October 30th.
by October 30th, then let's.
This guy's been around for 3 years. 3 years now.
But his commitment didn't stop us from doing anything but
Marketing.
accepting, no, not marketing,
no, we-
only accepting an offer.
I don't think
We were allowed to market it.
Sure. And that's, and we've been also getting
We haven't
paid
had any offers to
$8,000 a
accept
month.
or deny, and we made some money, so it's not a horrible thing.
And I
But
also-
you're right, he either has to give us an offer, or maybe we should start marketing it harder.
That's what I think we
Absolutely.
should do. That's what I think we should do. Agreed. And we should also make a decision about, we've had, the core area is, of course, the very difficult one, and that requires someone with an enormous amount of money, the 32 or 40 buildings. The Lot 1, which we've talked about, which is zoned commercial recreation, We have had a proposal, and there are others
We've got
in the
two
wings.
proposals.
And maybe we should move ahead with one of those.
There's other proposals, I'm sure, are gonna come in.
So that would be another thing to take a look at. All right, is that enough on this topic for now, or any other questions, comments? Okay, not seeing any, I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting. We have, I think we might have some. We do have two adjournments. We have Michael Fahey and Joan McCulloch, and both of whose names were adjourning this meeting tonight. I'll make the motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second from over here from Jerry? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.